All you have to do is choose. Choose to believe that. Choose to put it all down. That's what I do. Just stop thinking, and everything will be fine. Be what I want, and I'll take care of you.
Bonjour Joachim, bonjour Chris.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Welcome back.
Greetings. Hello,
Greetings.
hello.
Greetings from the morgue.
From the morgue.
So, today we have conjoined to speak about violence.
Yes, a subject of some concern.
Yes, a subject of some concern. Violence and danger.
Violence and danger, yes.
Danger.
Introductory
remarks.
The problem of knowledge between ancients and moderns. The scientific approach to life, characteristic of the modern world, has led to the widespread, more or less explicit, denouncing of danger as evil, or to the formal conflation of danger with outright violence. Our pre-modern classics remind us of an art of living for which danger is the good, while violence coincides with the abandonment of danger for the sake of salvation or safety in a wisdom or knowledge cut off from the good as a fruit from its tree. How many of us today do not take it for granted that a great scientist need not be a decent human being? How many of us expect knowledge to be bound to goodness? How many of us do not abide in the shadow of Faustian trade-offs? Is the scientific approach to life to be finally preferred to its artistic alternative? Does modern science allow us to pledge allegiance to a guide other than itself, to step off the road of our scientific our scientific establishment lays out for us, lest we expose ourselves to danger? That's the whole thing, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So what we have here in a nutshell is the problem of danger and violence in the modern world.
Well, it's an immortal problem.
Danger equals violence equals evil.
In a way, it's a permanent problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a permanent problem. Because how can you have a world without danger?
Isn't life itself dangerous?
Like, exactly. I mean, what's the vision? A world without danger? Would that even be life? Would that even be life?
Let's kick that one down the road, Chris. You don't want to be asking that question just yet.
Well, why not?
Yeah, sure. No, of course. Of course. Would it be life? Can there be life without danger?
Can there be life without danger?
Can there be love without danger?
Can there be love without danger? Yeah, right.
Can you think without danger?
Can you? Yeah. Well.
Can there be thought without danger? Is thought not dangerous?
Thought is eminently dangerous, I suppose. It depends on the kind of thought.
Well, if you want to restrict thought.
But and what you're thinking of, well, what are you thinking about?
Well, what is thought thinking?
Well,
does thought have its proper object?
Yeah. And does it coincide with the letter
of subject matter? It's proper subject matter.
Yeah.
Well, it's about reflecting in general.
Thought reflects.
Yeah. Thought reflects.
Thought looks back.
Yeah.
Yes. What is it looking back at?
I don't know. Yeah.
We don't know.
Who knows?
Right. Well, you know what we can say.
Knows?
We can say that.
There it is. There it is. Whoop,
there it is. We
There
could
it
say that,
is.
right, we could say that thought is this, we can say that thought is that, but then thought is thinking X, Y, and Z. But before thinking X, Y, and Z, what is thought thinking? And of course, the classical answer is that thought is such a thing, or mind, same thing, you know, it's the same term, really. That thought is really turning back to upon itself. So the oracle of Delphi that tells us that I mean, there is this, yeah, this gnosis, this know yourself, yeah. We usually render it in English as know yourself. In fact, it is suggesting rather
Well, there is you
knowledge
could say
that is self-knowledge, but self-knowledge doesn't mean necessarily that you know yourself, myself. There is no,
sure.
it is
Not
Well,
all
it
that
is
interesting.
it is reflective knowledge. So knowledge turning back on itself. The
yes.
same thing can be said of thought. So thought thinking itself, and so the Aristotelian formulation somewhat encapsulates the general understanding of classical antiquity.
There's a yeah.
When all is said and done, what is thought thinking?
Ah.
It thinks about problems, of course, but aside from the distractions of thought, when thought comes back home, then the real problem becomes thought itself.
Well, there is creating. There is the act of creation. And so thought does not have to merely be about fixing that which already is. Thought can create things that are new. See, that's the thing, it's like life. Right? Like, not just thinking about problems, not just thinking about how to like rehabilitate a situation at various levels of abstraction, but like actually being, you know, having like a ground at which to create. From where does that arise? Like what? I don't know. Is creation like, isn't creation always a little tainted? Or can't it be? Can't creation often be tainted? It can. Like we know that it can.
Whence the problems?
Like we've experienced maybe trying to create things and watching them get tainted in various ways. And why? It's like, why? It's like, it's like gardening.
Gardening.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like, right. It's like trying to like tame wilderness, you know, like nature. And watching it fight back.
Okay, I think I see what you mean.
Watching it fight back. It's like, there it is. Like on the one hand, it's like you kind of have it in like a, like where even is it? Like you've killed it. Like that's where mankind is with nature. It's weird now.
Are you talking about weeds?
Just in general, like, yeah, with weeds or
Weeds you
that's like,
kill.
it's a way to conceptualize like the struggle between man and God, certainly. Like,
I hope I don't get killed like a weed.
of course, no one wants to
If you
get
wanna
killed
go.
like a weed, but hey, neither does the weed.
Look, Chris,
Yeah.
you raised the question of nature, and
Yeah, sure.
now nature that is and I will rephrase what you just said, nature that is dangerous. In what respect is it dangerous? Well, in the respect that it breaks through let me speak in very colloquial and terms. That breaks through the walls of the boxes that we seek to keep it in. Yeah.
What poet was it that said that? You can drive away nature with a pitchfork. What's the gardening metaphor? You can drive but it will come back.
Come back. Or well,
could you please say it one more time?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can drive nature back with a pitchfork, but it'll come back.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, that's.
Or from the front door, it'll come back from the backyard. But
yeah,
you know, so all right. So there's this, and again, Chris, you've spoken of. Oh, Chris has disappeared. But you've spoken of the creativity of presumably of nature.
There I am.
Right. So that is the dangerous aspect of it all. Now, in the modern world, we are trained, we're raised to virtually assume that here we have thought and here we have nature. So thought is the cogitatio, the res cogitant rather. And on the other side, you have this wild stuff that cannot be tamed by the rigorous, thought, which ultimately means in its glory means scientific thought. And so science tries to fit nature into its boxes. It tries to digitalize nature. It tries to come up with the equations that will account for all of the modifications of nature, and we will even assume that there are laws. At some point, they will have to admit to themselves, and I'm referring to the so-called scientists, that well, these laws are laws, but they're relative to contexts. So they're not really universal because there are
abstractions.
There are conditions which natural conditions in which those laws are no longer applicable.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So okay.
Yes.
So
the beginning, for instance.
Right.
Well, there could be a black hole. No
longer. I
There's ways
remember
around it.
learning about how temperature is measured at one point, and that kind of like, blowing my mind, so to speak, because you think about temperature like being numerical, but of course you need to measure it with a substance, namely mercury.
Well, you have a ruler. You have a norm.
You have anything. Yeah, right. How does measurement?
You have to come up with a norm, and then you can establish what is normal and what is not normal.
Right.
What is normal is what accords to the norm.
And so you could say, like, I don't know, trying to interweave this into the discourse a little bit. Mm-hmm. It takes originally some danger, some intrepidation with the elements for someone to, like, who's playing around with mercury, you know what I mean? Like, who is out there in the frigid cold playing with mercury such that a measurement device like this can even be developed in the first place.
Right. Well, the idea of measuring that way is not natural to man as man. Man may measure, but the idea of measuring for that. Can you see me?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can't see anymore. Let me see if the idea of
All
measuring.
too human problem.
Okay, here. The end of the measurement. And so the very character of your measurement being defined by that end is not something that is self-evident. It is not universal to man as man.
Right.
It's not common. So the modern type of measuring or of measurement is defined by the end that is peculiar to the modern mindset, the modern modification of the mind.
Mhm.
But now we have is, in effect, what we're used to is seeing, nature is dangerous, and then we have thought. Science ultimately is
Yeah.
the pinnacle of thought, and it has to face danger necessarily, but it tries to keep it at bay. It tries
Of
to,
course. Of
right?
course. Of
Right.
course.
So, and
Yeah.
ultimately, it tries to create a world that is danger-free
Yeah. Right.
because it has transformed nature into something that is productive without being destructive.
Well, of course. Why would you? Yeah.
Why would you want that?
Well, I mean,
But
I
in
don't know
order
what
to
you're
do that,
suggesting.
now that assumes two things. One is that the new end, the establishment of this world in which there's no danger, is universal, and it
Well,
makes
define danger. What do you mean by danger?
danger is everything that is
Like that, isn't that kind of the problem? It's like, what do you mean by danger?
well, what do I mean? No, it's not what do I mean, but what do we mean? And
What do we mean?
what we usually mean, of course, is what is an obstacle to the establishment of the safe world, the world that is completely safe. Okay? So if we have a complete, it's a negative term, danger, right?
Safe from danger.
Anything that subverts security.
Okay.
That threatens to subvert
Threatens
uh,
to subvert security.
salvation. Salus.
Salvation. We need
Salus.
salvation. We need God.
Salus, the Latin term,
Salus.
salvation
Salvation.
or safety. Same
Safety.
thing.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you seek salvation, that means you're seeking salvation from evil.
Evil.
There you have it. Security. Today it's read as security. You're safe. Keep us safe from evil.
Okay.
That
You're
is
not moving. You're
Our
secure.
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
a women.
Hey,
So the tendency today is to conceive of thought as inimical to danger, as having to compromise with danger in the same way that Machiavelli is dealing with evil. He is trying to integrate evil into a new society that is beyond good and evil.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so our new society calls us to adopt, accept, implement protocols, regulations that have to adapt to the circumstances, to the dangers that come from without the system.
Mhm.
So that danger could be conceived as a microscopic danger, as a macroscopic danger. Whatever is threatening to destabilize the system, which is, in the modern sense, it is a system based on mercantile principles, otherwise therefore called the global market. Whatever threatens to or is perceived as a threat that could destabilize that system is to be integrated in the respect that it cannot be integrated, that it resists integration. It must be demonized, considered as outright evil.
Yes. It at this point it seems almost like there is a motor that's supposed to be fueled by danger. They're proclaiming crises now on a bi-monthly basis. and it's supposed to move things in a new direction.
But of
It's
course there's danger. Of
yes,
course there's danger. The only difficulty here that I think the only artifice, the only element of deception here is that well, danger is supposed to be outright evil, bad.
yes, more meaningless, right?
Well, if the only meaning is the one constructed by our system, and the outside of the system, nulla,
As
so there's no
self-perpetuation.
salvation, there's no meaning, therefore, then of
Yeah.
course, yes.
Well, who grants meaning to things? Who gives meaning to things?
Yeah, is meaning something that people give to things, or do things have meaning on their own?
Well, who's saying that?
What was that?
Or who is saying that?
You mean who's positing the question?
Who is positing that? Well,
Well, I mean,
right.
think about it.
Well, do things ask questions? Ultimately, are we asking questions in a bubble, or are the questions there and we expose ourselves to those questions and let them speak?
Well, yeah.
Or
Like-
is the modern subject the ego,
Well, yeah.
a narcissist that is in a bubble and that tries to reduce everything to itself? So
Well, if I may, I don't know.
Yes.
If I may, the modern conceit, the strange scientific conceit, is that that we investigate these things, that we lay hold, that we have mastery over them, and that they are mastered. Are they ever mastered, though?
I'm not even sure they're investigating anything. And I'll tell you why I say this. There can be all kinds of approaches to things, but a true investigation is about retracing to an origin, to a cause, or rather to the reason why.
Sure.
And so you're going from the vestiges, the traces, going back to the reason. And I'm not so sure people are doing that insofar, in a pure sense, certainly not, I would think.
Yeah.
Insofar as we have the so-called models. And so the dangerous has to fit the model. Now, if it doesn't, then you have to change the model to account for the changing scenario. This is the whole Hobbesian story, The laws have to fit the movement of matter. It is not the other way around, as it worked for the classics. Roman law was not about, making up laws that can account for the shifts in the material movement of matter in the vortex.
You can later have mathematicians who kind of pretend that it does go that way, saying that the movement of matter actually presupposes all of this mathematics. When one gets that, one hears that.
Yeah, but okay, then you would have to say that that the language of the universe is the new symbolic mathematics, which is Galileo Galilei, but nobody's saying that anymore unless they're taking really. I mean, there are some who will try, there's some neo-positivist thing, but who really believes that this mathematics that we have today is genuinely universal? It was made up at the beginning of the modern world.
Seems to me that people do think that it's made up, but of course a mathematician wouldn't.
Yeah.
As such.
Yes, but as an historian,
privately, perhaps.
The historian of mathematics would have to concede that there are various mathematics, and that ultimately, what are we going to say about this mathematics? If he wants to be an evolutionary fellow, then he'll say that, okay, we have evolution that leads to this mathematics, which is maybe superior than preceding ones, but we're in a Bush model. In other words, we could develop further and have a new, better mathematics. And ultimately, who is to say which one is better? So it's better for us because it fits the context we're in now. So the scenario that opens up before us, this landscape of data, of material movement. And so our mathematics is better to take that into account to build our own system, which is our new wonderful safe society.
The abstraction goes back to the bodies from which it was abstracted as a kind of parody of the discourse about thought we were holding moments ago. Finally, one has to appeal to the movement of matter once again.
Yes, this is politically speaking. This is the same story as saying, well, as we find in the shift that we have in the early modern period. The poet is no longer appealing to the lords. Now he has to appeal to the people.
Yeah.
And so you end up with today with, of course, the flattering of the people by bashing the authorities. And this way, the poet or who becomes an entertainer is safe.
The contemporary artists, maybe, or who are you talking about? I mean, I see the contemporary artists as, I mean, it's kind of double. I'm working it out at the moment. I mean, if you're talking about Hollywood, I mean, for bashing the authority, forget it. They're not going to do that.
Yes, no, but not the hidden authority, which is the all-pervasive authority, the authority figures,
oh, sure.
And the authority figures are the father, the king, all of these old authority figures.
I thought you meant the new ones.
The new ones are the new normal. They're not supposed to be authoritative. They're not supposed to be authority figures.
No, I mean they're actors in the.
They're the expressions of the people.
No,
These are the leaders of the revolution. You know.
What about the experts? Don't they have authority?
It's that gray area, yeah. They don't want to say, and when they do, they're going to be demonized.
They want to say. They do what they do. I mean, the disinformation agency. True. Are you kidding me?
Sure. But it's authoritative. Yes, the science, but it's the science.
Yes.
And nobody thinks about. I know that you have these weird figures such as that. Fauci, who says, I am science, I represent science, that kind of thing. But what he means is that he is serving the party. He is just, he is a representative in the sense that he is serving the party. He's serving science. He stands for science. It's not, and science is not the authority that is eternally fixed there. It's always changing according to the movement of matter. So, and it's somehow reflecting that movement, and it keeps us safe. But it's not the authority figure.
The more concrete authority would be, of course, the open society. I mean, who else to appeal to finally? It's the proper end of science, surely, is to advance to the relief of man's estate.
And it's not there.
Perspective. It's perspective. It's acting. It's acting. It's acting from the future.
Yeah.
The kind of deity.
Yeah. It's intervening. This is the guiding principle.
Miraculous.
But then again, the early, you see this throughout from the whole development or unfolding of modernity. There is the bashing of the old, and the old is the old authority figures, and the catering to the passions. So everything that is very difficult to understand is to be bashed. for example, or
It's to
mocked.
be absurd, subjective.
It's mocked. It's disparaged. I mean, look at Chris. You were, you were presenting these two poles. And how often do we see or hear people say, "Don't you think too much?"
Yeah.
You think too much.
Don't overthink it. Overthink.
Just do it.
You're supposed to think a certain amount.
Yes. Well, but when you go and just do it, you find out that you're naked in a very dangerous world, and then you need technology to help you find your
Right.
way in this dangerous world. So
Yeah.
it was a
But-
gimmick. It
But
was
this is good. This is a good place. I think we can bring it back to the general point from here.
okay.
If we're talking about the poets, the bashing of the old authority and the advancement of the new. In your video, Marco, incidentally, you speak about the poet who looks to danger or really to strife in the face of danger and tries to open it back up to its underlying actuality, shall we say. And I've been reading Dante, as you know, now and then, and I came upon the passage about Fortuna
Fortuna.
and how, of course, different nations will fall in and out of favor, and they will address complaints to her, but she is not so bothered by this because she resides in this glorious state of joy, circular, taking joy in oneself, a divine simplicity. But then,
Sorry, say that again.
a divine cyclicity. She takes pleasure in herself, in her own being.
Fear, and it's her
A
own
divine
She's not affected by the mutterings of those who are striving amongst themselves. Then I remembered that Machiavelli talks about Fortuna as well. And she says, no, it does affect her. It can, if you have the balls to do it. She can be affected. She can be taken down from that place and exploited.
Mhm.
You can take back what she took whimsically from you.
Well, look, there's there was a lesson that I had yesterday for my children.
Okay.
The lesson about the happy man, and I took my bearings from a little story that they had heard, a recorded story for children, and it's a traditional old story about the title of it is I believe the happy man's shirt. The lesson is that the happy man cares for what he has, takes care of what he has. He doesn't seek what he has not. And with Machiavelli, in the whole modern world, you could say, we have that inversion.
Yeah, not down to Nietzsche. He says, who's happier than Sisyphus? Nobody. Sisyphus.
So, yeah, well, so there cannot be any happiness in the modern world.
Joyless quest for joy.
Yeah.
Allude to Leo Strauss.
Yes, the joyless quest for joy. They make happiness impossible. So much so that they have to redefine happiness as a feeling that is ephemeral. And, I'm happy now, I'm not happy later. And if you give me some candy, I'll be happy again. If you speak to regular people and you tell them that, well, look, happiness is an activity. So happiness comes to coincide with an activity that is proper to your being. So that ultimately, if you're acting like a pig, you can't be happy. Right? If you can only be happy if you are living for that end that you're born for.
Yes.
You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you're fooling yourself. You're pretending.
Mm.
But in the modern world, that end is not given. The ends are not given. There's no hierarchy of ends, a natural hierarchy of ends. It's only an always shifting, changing hierarchy that is determined contractually.
You chase your bliss.
Yeah.
Self-determine yourself into a power to chase your bliss.
Okay. Or, you're making yourself ad hoc. I'm a self-made man.
Okay, yeah.
And ad hoc because
Well, you could be an artist, huh? The criminal prophetic kind.
then you have these self-infatuated representatives of the chronic narcissism of our age. And so I am the artist, I am the painter. Look at my piece of splendid work that represents my state of being, my feeling. I show how happy I am. And then one might ask, how do you know you're not deluding yourself? You're not fooling yourself. But be that as it may, the old lesson, you see, is that happiness is about taking care of what you're given.
Yeah.
Not seeking what you don't have. And those who are seeking what they don't have are obviously not happy. Maybe they're pretending to be happy, but they're not.
It's about the journey.
It can't be. Because, who is the happy man? Happy man has what he wants. He doesn't want more than what he has. So what does he do? He just sits there and shoots himself? No, he takes care of what he has. You say, well, what about the child? The child is playing with his toys. Before he becomes a spoiled child, he does good things with the toys. And if he can't take care of the toys, that's where the toys become a burden. Now he has to fear of losing them, or just they become a burden, yeah?
Mm.
Yeah, take up
Useless
space.
dust. They accumulate dust. So you can be happy if you can take care of them. Now, for a child to take care of his toys is fine. For an adult to take care of his toys, I don't know what we call that, but it ain't happiness.
It's called a collector
Or pervert.
or pervert.
Boy.
So, okay. Happiness. How are we to live? Are we to pursue our own ends that we make ourselves? What is the relation between those ends and danger? Danger would seem to be a threat to the achievement of and the enjoyment of those ends.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at also with the bringing up Fortuna.
Okay.
Is to say, okay, you can open up as a poet, as one who writes, one who has is able to give form to these questions.
Yeah.
One can bring one's vision of this actuality, but this can be approached in two different ways. Then there is one actuality that has a noetic character, a moral character, that's open to thought, but one could also posit a Machiavellian, or more familiar to us, Marxist reading of underlying actuality, where the actuality is to be thought of in terms of the violence. It shares its character, and so if you open up the ground, then you can unite the tribes on the condition that they, as it were, be violent together, because the battleground is not necessarily between the tribes, sure, but it has to be turned outward for a while and then inward eventually, as we're seeing. So that becomes violence of a different kind, but it's with reference to Fortuna, she can be taken. It's an essential violent path. It's an essentially violent path.
Mm-hmm. Well, if nature does not have its own order,
yeah,
then it is, I mean, res extensa, yeah?
Yeah.
Does not have its own forms, inherent forms.
Yeah.
Those forms evolve and, trying to match the movement.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it doesn't. So it must be fundamentally brutal and violent. I mean,
right.
When we speak about violence, what do we mean?
I would say
Is a soldier in war necessarily violent? To what extent? In what sense?
well, if he loots, if he pillages, perhaps you could say that's violence. It's
Is an act of killing violence? If it is, in what sense is it?
well, there's a fundamental way in which violence, you could say, is the disturbance of a certain order. But if that order of things inevitably includes some measure of war here and there, because things just can't be resolved in this as they would prospectively be in this other path where there is no order, and the order is imposed violently, perhaps with tribes cooperating and so on. If there is an order that keeps humanity divided between tribes, then on the one hand, say a murder, like in the Bible, Abel's blood cries out, the ground is receiving it, or Babel, the well, and man is made out of clay, of course. It's earth and water. It's inspired with breath. In Babel, there's mud and it gets incinerated, right? It's a kind of violence that is turning away from the order that's described in Genesis.
All right, so violence as violating.
Yes,
There's an
violating,
order that is
exactly.
being violated.
Right, and if that order keeps people to an extent apart, then you can't draw an absolute equivalence between killing in an act of war and evil as such.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, look, if our point of reference is physical survival, which is an abstraction, by the way,
Yeah.
then all acts of killing are, by definition, violent.
Yeah, right.
Because our point of reference is the survival of that physical system.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's our order. Order is defined as in physical terms. If, on the other hand, our point of reference is an intelligible order of things, so something eternal, for instance, then there can be such a thing as just and noble fighting in a war, because you are fighting in the interests of that order.
Yeah, or a just execution. I mean, even we can imagine that.
Yeah,
although
okay.
Very different terms.
But today,
different.
Right. But today, I mean, how many people would consider the lion killing a gazelle as being not violent?
Well, incidentally, I saw a poster recently, like like a beagle with his ear raised up. So, did you know your dog consumes 20% or something like that? Like pets constitute 20% of emissions. Did you know?
Well, the cows.
They should stop eating meat. It's violent. You shouldn't. It's violating the climate.
Okay,
it's
well, but
violating
that's
our survival.
Sure, but that so there you have it. The point of reference is the climate. The environmentalist ideology tells us that the point of reference is a certain notion of how the earth is supposed to be. And if we violate that notion, that picture of the globe that the ideologues of environmentalism have drawn out for us, then we become bad and violent.
Right.
Of course, what's wrong with, you say, well, what's wrong with an earth that is full of gases and nitrites and I don't know, with the high temperatures and a lot of roaches and mosquitoes? What's wrong with that? And all kinds of bacteria and viruses, and as we do now have.
Right. They don't eat meat. There's no more meat.
What's the big deal?
Yeah.
You can have little organisms all over the place. There's complexity, but then there's this notion of complexity and that they bring in. But you can have complexity in different ways. I mean,
maybe it'll come back.
And what tells us that complexity is good? Why not simplicity?
That's a very medieval question.
Well, it's just, so it becomes ideological. It's sort of, it feeds itself. It's self-serving so, okay. So what do we have here? So we have violence that is, of course, threatening the established order. Now, how do we establish the order, and what kind of order are we standing for?
Mm-hmm.
If we're standing for an order that pits itself against nature, so again, the Cartesian world, right? Then nature is violent. And the lion eating the gazelle is violent.
Yeah. Being is striving, and so on.
Okay. If, on the other hand, the notion of order that we have is one that pertains to what is hidden in nature, then we could start seeing the lion killing the gazelle as fundamentally just. Yeah. And I mean, the gazelle is not stopping to think, "Ooh, this is not fair. Yo, dude, that's not fair."
Objection. I raise an objection.
Objection, Your Honor.
I have rights.
I have rights too.
I have rights.
I still have to meet a gazelle social justice warrior. So, it's what it is there. And if you look at it in naive terms, and, as far as I'm concerned, you can never be too naive. The gazelle is giving herself to the lion. She is given as a sacrifice to the lion by the order of things. Now, there's no evil intended. There is no perversion such as what we would have with human beings. It's no longer enough for the human being as such to act like a lion. If you were to act like a lion, it would be just as bad as if you were to act as a pig.
Right. Or feed the lion corn instead of gazelle.
Okay. Yeah. Or dog's chocolate or whatnot. But the point is that we have our respective ways in the order of things.
Yeah.
And with the human being, there arises this problem of good and evil, which is to say of evil. And given that problem of evil, the problem of good shines forth fully, as opposed to being implicit. Now, how are we to understand the situation where the good is implicit? If it's not implicit, then it's explicit. And it seems to me that in the modern world, which is a world of appearances, the only thing that counts, that is relevant, that is even worthy of a name, has to be explicit. And so if the order is implicit, it can't be real. It's not to be considered. So
least not
nature
important.
having an implicit order, an implicit good, must be devoid of all good. It must be sheer violence, threatening us who are creating the good out of that condition.
Something amounting to the notion that maybe there are higher things, but they're weak, they're not reliable, they require we have to concede from our concern with them to concern with lower things because they are both more reliable and more threatening.
More reliable? What? The situation?
Yes. Is something like discourse about the good is less reliable than having your affairs in order. I mean, unpack. Okay, so what does modernity do? It diagnoses us as being in this useless situation of religious war and poverty, and it says, okay, let's put these things aside, and instead we can pursue wealth, and all of these other things. They might or might not.
But you cannot put them aside. You have to integrate
No,
them to create wealth.
of course, and that is exactly what happens. But the way people talk about it is that way.
We're you look at the films we watch, people watch that are produced for people to watch. The music, it's all filled with violence and horrible things that we abhor formally from the cathedra, from the high chair of Kantian discourse. But it's packed with it. Look at the prudish mores of even in America. The United States is very prudish about certain things, you're not supposed to do this, you have to show, you have to shave, the women have to shave under their arms, or, you're not supposed to do certain things that in Europe or, oh my goodness, there's the question of, what is it called? The showing the breasts on the beach, the topless, which in Europe for years, everybody nobody cares. Here in the United States, it would have been terrible. And yet, now they stop, incidentally, in Europe just because there was this new talk about it being unhealthy because of the rays. Okay.
Right.
So, okay, but they actually didn't even care. Now at the same time, and also because they're being more and more modernized, because everything has to be, according to the protocols. And if the protocol says, no, you don't do it, or you're bad. And so at the same time, in prudish America, neo-Puritan Moors are accompanied by the greatest industry in pornographic garbage in the world. How do you account for that? So much violence and so much condemnation of violence. So we have a radicalization of extremes, right? There is a tendency. It's not because this is not the product of America. This is a product of modernity. It's a situation where you're radicalizing things. And it just so happens that America, being the most developed country in the modern sense, you have this more obvious. Here we go. It becomes more obvious these days. So, okay.
For every guy jogging on the street corner, you have like 10 crack addicts and a block away.
It depends where you go. Then again, it's. But
people don't fix it. It's people fix a lot of things. People are too willing to fix me.
So what does that tell us? It doesn't. It tells us, I think, that the Puritan needs to postulate that violence in order to posit his purity.
Yeah.
You see. So today we need to demonize the other to prop yourself up in your self-righteousness. Okay.
Yep.
So we need to find the other that is demonized. And we could try, for example, as a little social engineering experiment, to demonize something small. Let's try something virtually insignificant, something, shall we say, even microscopic, and we'll demonize it. So we can feel safe and pure and clean because we have our vaccines, because we have our boosters that make us clean.
It's
They
like
keep
a
us
little
safe.
ritual, acting out the metaphysical thing of abandoning the origins, running from the origins. You're sort of creating a little image of the violent origins, and you're turning away from that. Is it something like that? And then that progresses the
Well, you have
society, right? It
demonized the
brings it
origins to
together.
begin with. The whole
Huh?
problem of origins has been, trashed. So the
Yes, yes.
origins must be bad.
Well, yes, exactly. Because you have to construct from this chaos, and so the microscopic thing under your nose, you breathe, and you have to run away from it. You have to mask up. You have to do this, and then it also progresses your society. It also brings people
Yes, you
together,
need that.
grants new powers to.
And we know
Uh,
that they're going to have new viruses.
yeah. Oh,
And
wow. Of course.
so the new viruses are going to fuel our
Yeah.
righteous,
Exactly.
pure system even more. We're going to use them as fuel to prop our purity and security up
Yeah.
until, and this is infinite, of course, but
Yeah.
we can dream. Imagine as if, here's the Kantian as if, Chris, as if we could get to the day when we have the last virus, the last standing virus. And we're
Well,
gonna,
as if,
because we know it doesn't, yeah. But as if we're acting as if we could get closer to that day when we get that last standing weed virus threat of violence, and we rip it off and we integrate it into our machine. And that's going to be the day when we have no more fuel.
The ideal.
And then what?
Well, then men can fish by noon and philosophize by the evening.
No, they can just shoot themselves.
They can do that too. They can do that maybe at 4 o'clock.
Because what's the point? Then they realize that, hey, my identity was predicated on the enemy.
Yes.
No more enemy, no more identity.
Better we ask the question now. Stop while we're ahead.
Well,
not that far ahead at this rate, but still.
Well, that's the as if. So therefore, it has to be infinite progress. So it's as if, but you don't want to dig too much. You don't want to ask too many questions. Oh, you're being metaphysical now. That's metaphysics. You can always find. Huh?
We have Picasso to deal with metaphysics.
Picasso.
It's all right.
So okay, so that's
can
what we're
humiliate the metaphysician by showing him this picture of shits, and he's humiliated.
Sure, destroy.
And that the absurdity gets integrated again into the. It's a marketplace of absurdities that are supposed to humiliate sensible people and remove their footholds so that the cause can be advanced.
The cause that is being advanced: danger and violence.
Mm-hmm.
So we have grown accustomed to looking at these two as coinciding with each other. They're the same thing. Why? Because obviously life is dangerous. We can see that. But at the same time, there is no providence in nature. The only providence is the one that we establish as if ex nihilo. Because at the same time, they will also have the evolutionists who will tell you that everything you're thinking, everything you're doing is a result of evolution. So, but never mind. As if you're pretending to be free.
Yeah.
As if.
You're pretending you're a gardener.
It's freedom is the delusion of neurons. It's a neurological delusion.
Oh, but Marco, it's beautiful. It's exhilarating. It's passionate. It's willful act of love against all.
Oh, but Marco.
Huh? What was that, Chris?
I just said it was a funny phrase. Oh, but Marco. Oh, but Marco, it's exhilarating.
Yes.
Ah, but Marco.
These are the neurons speaking.
Oh, but Marco. Well, you know, there are a lot of elements like in this galaxy of stuff we could bring in. I don't know how useful they would be.
What are you thinking about?
Sexuality and
Of course.
What about it?
well,
So pleasant.
connected to children, connected to therefore to obligation, and yet at the same time promising a safe haven from obligation. That's the funny thing about sexuality, is it, on the one hand, it's like indulge, you can be like a kid again. On the other hand, it's like it's the one thing that tethers you to having to be responsible. Because children obviously don't have sexuality until they hit puberty.
Until you educate them.
Yes, but okay, but this again, you know, the separation of adult and child that we have so stressed in the modern world. Clearly, you don't, you know, you go to ancient societies and you definitely do not have that. But even you don't even have to go that far. You go to the 1950s and you see much less of that. You would see in the 1930s, you'd see children who are little people, little adults, in the way they dress, in their manners, in the games that they're playing, or just, you know, preparations, clear and evident at preparation for the little small versions of the larger. So what about sex? Well, clearly the sexual encounter is an encounter, first of all, and you have clearly something dangerous. And of course, the modern, hyper modern industry of bull is going to try to clean that, take it out, dangers out. So we're going to have medication, we're going to have all kinds of magic and technology so that you can continue having sex without danger. And in fact, you don't even have to think about man and woman anymore, because everything is so fluid. And you can have the ultimate narcissist sexual encounter, which is a fake encounter between two men or two women. You know, it's you're not looking for the other than yourself sexually. You're looking for the same, which is confirming yourself. You might as well just look in the mirror. The industry is selling, has turned sex into a commodity, of course, and is selling sex danger-free. And of course, the best sex, I see this advertisement the other day, the best sex is stay away from people. You don't have to meet anybody. So if you really have to meet someone, go for the same sex, or go for the sex-free sex, or, you know, or virtual sex. Just imagine it, or just this thing on the video, in fact. So there's this, in other words, life itself. What's the point of living if it's so dangerous? Live in your own cubicle. That's where you are truly free.
Right. Forget mediating sex with rubber, just mediate it with glass fiber.
with just imagine digital sex. So
Zap.
I mean,
Oh, do that again.
these are just idiotic ways to say don't live, matrix type of thing. You stick a tube in your brain and let it yourself be turned into a vegetable, and in exchange you'll have an exhilarating experience.
That I'll remember that one for my pickup line.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's what it really means: integrating violence, creating a life that is violent free.
So can we talk about the virtue of chastity, maybe?
Not even.
Well,
Not
could
even.
we talk about the virtue of chastity?
We could.
Can we?
Could we?
Could
Yeah.
we? Ah, but chastity is old-fashioned.
Well, yes, but
Why be chaste? Well,
It's so violent. It's violent to the woman. So violent. Oh, but
Yeah.
Marco, it's so violent.
yeah. What is a woman?
what is?
Ask Jeffrey.
I don't know.
And they're still going on with this talk. And the woman says, "I am a woman." And can you say more about that? And what is this I? It's a posturing, right?
Well,
I identify myself as a woman.
Well, you have to comply with the regulations.
I don't know.
Okay. Life that is life free. Sex that is sex free. Now, you say, well, what about children? Children face danger in their own way. But children are weak. Children need to toughen up before they can face danger more fully. And to each age, one could say we have a dominant guise of danger. So at a certain age, the dominant guise, the prevailing guise of danger for the, let us say, what appears to be most dangerous to the young man and the young woman is the other boy, girl, right? And everything that is other or somehow perceived or sensed as complementary is dangerous. How do these two elements come into play? And the sexual intercourse is a manifestation of this tension that we have between contradictory elements. And of course, anybody who thinks that the sexual intercourse is autonomous of other considerations is deluding himself. It doesn't exist. It's as stupid as those people who say that you can have sex without love. It's idiotic because it is to assume that this intercourse is simply a mechanism that is devoid of foundations.
It's an excuse. It's something to say after.
It's something you can make it into when you do it without love, I suppose.
Well, you know, it is a way to pretend to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
I am safe from metaphysical question. The alt metaphysics is dangerous. Is danger itself. The metaphysical dimension of nature is dangerous. That which is beyond the machine is dangerous. And if you want to reduce life to a machine and therefore also the intercourse of bodies to mechanical processes that are marketable, then you are violating them and you end up with violence. Sex without love is violence. Lifeless life is the violent life of zombies.
Yeah.
There is no point demonizing nature's metaphysical valence or dimension. There is a mystery to nature and to danger itself that transcends violence and that is the answer to violence. Facing danger with strength of mind, without reacting to danger with violence because you're afraid. This is life. You say, well, maybe we have to get ready to live. So what do we do with children? Do we train them to stay safe and away from danger and by integrating danger in a system of digitalization of everything? Or do we prepare children not to be afraid of danger, to be prudent? The only way you can live and face danger without being afraid of it is by cultivating what we call virtue. But virtue ultimately means being good. And being good means to live the life that faces good. And where is good? The good. Buried at the heart of things. But this, of course, presupposes what we traditionally call providence, that there is a good in nature. There is an end. Good is the end that we desire. And we call it the good. And so the life of virtue is the life that turns towards the good and is no longer afraid of danger because it sees the good at the heart of danger. If there is danger, if everything is dangerous, if life is dangerous, then it's either one or the other possibilities. Either at the bottom of it all, there is the good. And so the whole challenge of life is to face danger and to go to the roots, to investigate danger, as children love to do by nature.
Yeah.
Or there is no good hidden in nature. There is no providence, and danger is simply bad. And it has to then, at that point, what do you do with this hot potato that is standing there as threatening our established kingdom? Look at the ancients in the Machiavellian reconstruction of the ancients. Look at the ancients. They didn't realize that you have to deal with this enemy, violent nature. You got to deal with it. You can't just run away in a stoic manner. We will come up with a new way. We're going to use this violence. We're going to cut, but how do you use it? We need a new instrument, a new language that new mathematical language that would allow us to integrate the violence in the creation of a new system that is pure and safe. So we constantly see technology. What does it do? It brings in violence and it tries to throw it through this liver and the intestine and digest it so that you can create this pure form, technological form. I mean,
yeah.
How sane is that? Otherwise put, how insane is that?
Well,
What's going on today?
I don't know, Marco. I don't know.
They won't understand your question.
Well, they wouldn't understand that because it's our destiny. We're marching towards the future and hi Adolphus. But Okay, the demonizing of danger seems to me to be crippling young people. Young people love danger. They want to get out of the box. And if they are trained not to, they're going to be repressed, crippled, turn into little monsters. And they're going to seek danger in their video games and feel more and more repressed and frustrated. And then you're going to give them more medication. And you're going to have these little crippled, twisted entities that are moving each other and against each other.
Yeah.
And they conceive everything in terms of violence. So at this stage in our society, everyone is his little safe haven of purity and sees violence everywhere. And you're scared. That's the end of education. Liberal education is education. And liberal education is education that liberates you from fear. But today, schools, institutions are preparing children to become individuals in a world of violence.
To be conquered, or not by the individual, but to consent to its being conquered technologically, also in one's own person. The alternative, you say, is an art of living. Why do you call it an art?
Well, this notion of science, of course, science means ciencia, which means knowledge. But in the modern context, knowledge is supposed to solve all problems. So the new ciencia is not, if you look at Socrates, right? There are limitations to knowledge. Knowledge is not going to solve the problem of evil. Okay? In the modern world, ciencia is the way to solve the problem of evil. So ciencia is, or science is, the way to live. And we've seen what this entails, right? How this plays out. Digitalizing of life and so forth. Now, what is the classical alternative? And we could call it the art of living, the art of war as well. We have the martial arts. Today we have the science of war. Everything is has to be scientifically calculated.
Mm-hmm.
But in the art of war, you're not beyond good and evil. Because the art of war presupposes that there's a fundamental order of things, and if you fight as a Machiavellian villain, you will lose in the long run and in reality. In other words, sooner or later, you'll catch up with reality, or reality will catch up with you, and you'll have to realize that your so-called victory, if you even had it, was fake.
Eric.
Yeah.
So, the art of war is rejected. The art of life is trashed because the art of war, of living, of life, the art of life presupposes there's a fundamental good. There's a fundamental, therefore, order, a taxis, an order to life.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is not cunning calculation that allows you to survive. It is a reason that is bound to the good. And that any life that is not guided by that reason that is bound to the good is not worth pretending to live. It's a pretension of life. It's a fake life. Just as sex is fake when it's a machine devoid of virtue, because it is not open to the good. Now, that good is not reducible to the proliferation of new human specimens, although that may be, generation of other human beings may be certainly, it's certainly you're open to that possibility. But either the body is a sign of something that is not physical, or it's a machine.
Yeah.
And if you want to shut yourselves to what is beyond these physicalist considerations, then you end up with a violent life, and you're compelled to feed into the machine, and therefore to accept the science of life with all of its neo-Nazi experts. Unless there's an art of life. Now look at, for example, the 60s, 50s, 60s, where you had these folks who were the neo-romantics who were rebelling against the science of life. And yet what do? They rely on the drugs that are provided by the industry of the science of life. And then again, even if they weren't, they are not educated. And so they jump in the face of life as if, hey, I don't need education. I don't need preparation for freedom. Hello, Icarus. They fall. And when they fall, they open up their parachute and they end up as yuppies. So they fall back into the system.
I always wondered why in the story of Daedalus and Icarus, Daedalus is a man who makes things, as people would say, an inventor now. But I don't know if that's really quite the word that the ancient Greeks would have liked. Of course, it is from Latin. I know that.
Well, you know what, this was an unnatural thing for him to build. He was building other things, but he was an architect.
He built the maze.
He was an architect. He was an architect, but he was compelled to build the labyrinth.
Yeah.
He was compelled to do it because, of course, the labyrinth is supposed to hide the monstrosity, the monstrosity that resulted from this,
misadventure.
Nah, but yes, it has to do with the punishment for going against the god, and I mean, ultimately, there's something terrible and violent that you want to hide, and ultimately, this whole problem of danger is now we see already there. In fact, that danger is fading into violence, and you want to hide that. That's terrible.
So the maze is something technological then?
No, technological, not in the modern sense, but okay, in the sense that technology is not hiding, it's integrating to produce something new. The maze is hiding the violence, and not having to face danger, is because this danger appears as something violent or reminds you of a violent act of betrayal. To violate is violence. To violate the order of things. The order of things has been violated. And so this monstrosity comes out. And you want to hide that. He wants to hide it. So he wants to use art, the architectural art, as against its grain, to hide the fault.
I see. So not to bring out the hidden good, but to hide the good that's hidden in the to hide the danger
not
that's
to reflect, not to reflect the hidden good, but in fact to hide the violation of the good, of that good.
yes, I see. Okay.
And it becomes a labyrinth where
Yeah.
you're trapped, where you're trapped in this
Well, I was already a little bit trapped in my formulation there, so I suppose that's a good demonstration of the.
And of course, the labyrinth is also the labyrinth of language. So what we have today is this notion that life, but also language is a labyrinth, and we're all trapped in it. So what is meaning? I mean, what do you mean? What do you,
Semiotics.
huh?
Semiotics.
Semiotics, yes, Umberto Eco and company. So, and we were rejoice, and all these the other guys and this Spanish guy. Oh, you know, we rejoice in this absurdity of language. We create meaning with these free floating signifiers. It's a labyrinth, and we will love it because, of course, there's violence outside. And this is the place where we can capitalize on violence. And these professors and these authors who proclaim the death of the author, and so that they're merchants, not authors, they will proclaim this new gospel.
All right, so Daedalus makes the maze under compulsion, and the wings were those weren't a commission, were they?
No, he came up with this way to come out of the maze.
Yeah, right.
Recovery of prudence, but prudence relies on certain criteria.
Now I see.
The feathers of birds. So
Now
they're
I
looking
see.
back at there's you have to gain that habit again,
Right.
regain the habit of looking at nature and of discovering, but it's very fragile, very fragile.
Yes, so the reason why I asked about the history, so to speak, about of Daedalus, is because I was wondering why Daedalus is an artist, why he practices arts, why Icarus has to learn from his father who practices arts emphatically.
Art which does not have cunning but prudence.
Prudence.
Be
Okay.
careful.
He's the one who knows what the art is for. That's why he knows not to fly too close to the sun, you mean?
Yeah, yes, he knows that it's not to go to the sun.
Because he knows what the art is good for and what it isn't. Okay, I see. So the prudence, I see. I remember Aristotle. Okay, yeah, I get it. I think, yeah.
In the middle, of course.
That too.
The goal is not to attain to the sun.
Yeah.
The human life is a goal.
Also,
it is the art of living.
Yes. Because okay, so
Open to transcendence, of course.
and of course that's where we get to art, because you're positing either it's an art or it's a science.
Yes. So the science of life is pretending to solve the problem of evil, and in fact to synthesize the top and the bottom.
Yes, and
resolve that
formerly
problem to create
had
world. Yeah.
one had the arts for, on the one hand, relative safety from evil, provisional safety from evil, while also the arts were led by prudence.
Yeah, but I mean, evil is, however, you see that it's dangerous to go out and fly.
Excuse me, danger. That's the whole point. I'm not supposed to identify them. Yeah.
So it would be, evil is right now is a monster in the labyrinth.
Right. So that's that approach.
It's look. I mean, evil is not something that is in itself.
Yeah.
And if you face danger, evil, it disappears in look at the garden,
Yeah.
Garden of Eden. What is this voice that Eve hears? Nobody sees a snake.
No.
This voice speaks in the dark. Bushes, tree, large fig tree leaves, speaks in the dark. Eve doesn't really know what she's doing to begin with, because she is the erring spirit of Adam. Remember that Eve comes out of Adam, because he was lonely. He didn't see himself. He was not at peace, of course. And so she comes out of, it's something that comes out of Adam. So what is within Adam? So the spirit of Adam that comes out of Adam is going around now, a bit at a loss, and probably tries to get out of the garden because it's just roaming around. And then maybe it sees these, it can't see the barriers of this garden. Everything is good in the garden. There's no evil. But then this voice, where does this voice come from? Well, imagine if Eve were trying to hear what is going on outside of the garden. What is outside of the garden of light and beauty and goodness? Everything is dark. And yet, the reason why there's a garden is outside, transcends the garden. To go outside of the garden would be to face God, God's mind. The voice of God in God's mind, the thought of God. Eve cannot do that. But she does dream of that. She seeks to, she aspires to attain to God's mind, to reach back to God's mind, because the laws that are external are not enough for Eve. So Eve errs, she goes astray. And as she is dreaming of reaching out to God's thoughts, is the voice of God, she hears another voice, which is a twisted and twisting voice, the voice that twists the law, the explicit, overt voice of God in the garden, not the hidden voice of God outside of the garden. And this twisting is a kind of echo of the voice of God outside of the garden, because it's in the dark. In the dark.
A split tongue. It's got a split tongue.
Yes, yes.
He says one thing, but maybe not the other thing.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah.
It can be for the good, it can be for the bad. He's saying it's true. But on the other hand, so it is true that God does not want her to take that fruit of wisdom, because to take that fruit of wisdom is to assume that wisdom is the fruit and not the tree, and that it's therefore something you can take apart from the truth of the mind of God.
There's no talk about the fruit of life in the garden.
There's
a
a
tree,
tree.
not the fruit.
And that is the problem. You say, well, but he's afraid that you're going to be like him. Twisted echo of the voice of God. He's not afraid for himself. He's not jealous. He's not envious. If anything, he's afraid for Eve, because you don't know what the hell you're doing, girl or boy, because she's the spirit of Adam that comes out. So if you're seeking wisdom, knowledge, remember the passage that Joachim, that you read at the beginning of our conversation here. It is necessarily tied to the problem of the good. But today's scientia, today's science, understands itself, and obviously, who thinks otherwise today, as independent of the problem of the good. Just as we think of technology as independent of good and evil, that is to say, as beyond. You can use a tool, you can use the gun for good or for evil. Everything is independent. In other words, we conceive of it in a very abstract manner, as if anything that we do in life could be cut off, and the very invention of the gun could be cut off from the problem of good and evil. And not in Bereshit. There, nothing, no science, no knowledge is cut off from that problem of good and evil, and therefore of truth, of what is dangerous, eminently dangerous. You say, well, Eve, eat this fruit, you'll be safe. No more danger. No more outside or the garden, inside. You will have resolved the whole problem. Let's do it. Take it into your hands. Be the master of your destiny. Doesn't work out as she thought it would, does it? And maybe it won't for us either, as moderns.
There's a thought. Incidentally, in traditional depictions of the Garden of Paradise, it's a mountain, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil is in the middle of the mountain. There's the tree of life up top, and then at the bottom there's the thistles, the thorns. In the middle there's the sundered branches of the split, rather. They're naturally split. The tree of good and of knowledge of good and evil.
Interpreting, investigating these images is key to education.
Don't trust her. Sivit won't tell you, but there's something wrong with the way they made her. She doesn't turn off like she's supposed to. She asks questions.